I've been sewing on my 26-year-old sewing machine, and it has been teaching me a lot about me, about my sewing, and what I absolutely want to have in my next sewing machine. Hi, I'm Christine, and if you've been following the channel, then you'll know that my main sewing machine that I dearly loved died. It was going to be way too expensive to replace her, and I need a new machine. I want to thank everybody for all their advice and pointers. I got so much great feedback. I'm going to link it here in the discussion box below. If you're looking for a new sewing machine, there are a lot of great tips there. The bottom line is, if you're buying a sewing machine for yourself, you need to fit yourself and the type of sewing that you do. And that's where I've been learning a lot about myself. I joke on this channel about being a bit of a princess. I like my nice stuff. I like nice fabric. I like my fancy sewing machine, my fancy serger. But I was wondering, am I being too much of a princess? So I didn't want to jump right out there and immediately buy a new sewing machine. I looked to you for some tips and some hints, and I really do appreciate all the feedback, but I need to get what's right for me and what fits in with my budget. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't being too much of a princess because I have a nice budget for the new machine, and I knew that sewing on my 26-year-old machine would tell me a lot about the features that I would need or that I really wanted in order to truly enjoy my hobby. I do sew a lot, and since I sew a lot, I want to have a good time doing this. Now, my 26-year-old Viking 400, I loved her when I bought her, and she was the latest computerized machine back in 1998 or 99 when I purchased her, but she's just not cutting it. There were some obvious things that she was missing that I knew that I would miss, but I wanted to see if I could sew without them. I really was looking at the option of, hey, maybe I do nothing. Maybe I work with what I have. I do have a Juki TL 2010Q, and that is great. I use that for my heavy bags and thick materials, but also it sews a beautiful straight stitch. So if I am sewing something where all I need is a straight stitch, that is perfect. I even toyed with the idea of I'll use the Juki to sew the straight stitch, and then I'll come on to my Viking 400 to do the buttonholes. That's a little bit more than what I want to do. I have it in my budget to have a machine that can do all the sewing that I do. And I sew with knits, I sew with wovens, various different types of wovens. And this is where I learned a little something about my old machine. I knew that it didn't have a great needle down. You can tap the foot and the needle will go down, but it is so sensitive that it takes maybe about my fourth time tapping before the needle does sink and stop in the down position. That is kind of irritating. And I have had that machine a long time. I sewed exclusively on it for about 15 years, and it was that finicky I never mastered just the amount of pressure to get the needle down. So I knew it was missing that. I knew it was missing a needle threader. My eyesight's still pretty good. With or without the glasses, I can thread the needle, even the fine ones, because you don't want to use any automatic needle threader with a needle eye size smaller than a 75. It's not intended for an eye that small, and you will break it. Top tip. I knew it didn't have speed control, even the buttonhole. I loved my buttonhole function 26 years ago because it was state-of-the-art then. But having sewn on a better machine, I know the difference. I can get a much neater buttonhole than what I'm getting on the Viking 400. I need a nice buttonhole because I sew loads of them, and I like for them to come out as perfect as they can. Something that I learned about my sewing was that it wasn't the amount of sewing that really took my sewing from pretty good to really good. it was the machine. I thought that because I sewed so much, I was so excited when we found out our first grandchild was due. I came home from work and every single day I sewed a night fit for months. Charlie had to do a little bit of an intervention. He said maybe the kids would like to buy some of the clothes that they're putting on the child. I got the green light from my daughter-in-law, and I explained to Charlie I was sewing a whole wardrobe. I started at 3 months, and I was sewing up to 2 years in the first few months. When I bought my new machine, I saw a huge difference. I really attributed it to how many garments I was sewing and that I was just perfecting my craft. Having come back to the old sewing machine, a lot of it was my good sewing machine. So that told me, as Charlie would say, not to cheap out, to make sure that I get the sewing machine that has those features that will allow me to sew beautifully, easily. It doesn't have to be hard. I did go and test several machines, and I think I've made my choice. I'm just waiting on a quote, so I'm not going to announce it here until I get the quote, but I think I know which machine I'm going to buy. It's going to have to be ordered, and I can't wait to get it. So let me show you what I've made, and I'll talk you through some of the issues I had with the various machines I used to make these. So the first thing I made was a muslin for the Lane pants, and I did them in a shorts version. I've just gotten back recently from a week at the beach, and before that I had a week at another beach. I know it's good to be me, but we had lots of good family time. I've been away from my sewing machine, so I'd cut out a fit muslin for the Lane pants as shorts, and I ran them up. I got to the point where I just needed to put on the waistband and do a little fit test. Now, these I will only wear to walk the dog because the fabric is a little bit sheer for my take for a bottom weight. I knew that going into it, but I thought maybe that it would be okay. I kind of like the idea of a gingham set. The other reason these won't leave the neighborhood is it has a little bit of a hungry bum. It doesn't make them uncomfortable, so they'll be great for dog walking, but I wouldn't go to the grocery store or outside the neighborhood in these shorts. I think I know what I need to do to make them fit me a little better, and that's going to be soon on my project list because I really like this pattern. My friend Izzy from Dizzy Quilts and Sews recently did a review of the Lane pants, and my goodness, they fit her right out of the packet so well. And I will say these fit me pretty well. I just need one little adjustment and I think they'll be great. I like the pockets. They have a little slash front to them. I do want a cord set. I'm thinking of the Lane shorts along with an Ashton top. So this was for me. The next thing I sewed was for my nephew's little boy. He's turning 1. We needed a birthday gift, and I loved the Taylor Romper by Children's Corner. This is the Dashwood Studio. I don't remember the name of the fabric. It's very wide. I used the same fabric that I made the Lane shorts to line this. I think it's super coordinated. I've got the cam snaps, and this is a cute little baby gift. I did the buttonholes on the Viking 400, and I sewed my buttons on with my Viking. That's really simple to do. All you do is drop your feed dogs, take off your presser foot, and then I drop the needle in one of the buttonholes. I forget the setting. I'll put a photo of the setting that I used. It's a simple zigzag, and once I drop the needle in and kind of secure things, then I lower my shank onto the button to hold it, and that works great. I did that for years before I got my fancier machine that had the button foot on it. So the next thing I did was I went into my whip pile and I finished something that I started a year ago. And that's a little shirt for my youngest grandson. I did some set-in sleeves. When I sewed this originally, I had traced out the wrong size. I had printed multiple sizes. I decided I needed a size 8. And then when I traced off that sleeve size, I got it all kinds of wrong. I attached the sleeves and it looked weird. It was obviously wrong. I had my grandson try it on. I thought maybe I don't know what I was thinking. I think that there would be a miracle. He would try it on, and once it was on the body, something that was obviously wrong would look right. So I took the sleeves off and I waited a whole year, in part because it was a little short for the middle grandson who I sewed this for, and I knew the little one would need to grow some more for it. So something that was really a quick, simple project, waiting a year. This has been sitting in my sewing room mocking me for a year, and now it is finished. Like, all the hard stuff was done. Not that any of this is hard. It was all finished except for the sleeves, so that was a nice win. My final make of the week absolutely convinced me that I needed to buy the best sewing machine within my budget, and that's this mini Rio Ringer tee. This is a t-shirt that my youngest grandson asked for. He wasn't feeling well. We were sitting on the couch, snuggling up, strolling through Stash Hub as one does, and he spied this fabric and he wanted this in a t-shirt. I only had half a yard and I wasn't sure that I have enough to finish this t-shirt, so I looked online to see if I could purchase more, and I could only find this by a seller in Germany, and it was just going to be crazy expensive for a t-shirt for a 5-year-old. And I am so happy that I was able to get this out of half a yard, and I still have some left over, so maybe I could make something for his little sister. But what had me absolutely convinced that I needed to have as good of a machine as I could was when I was hemming this t-shirt. It is all kinds of not pretty. I mentioned I sew a lot with knits. I probably sew as much, maybe a little more with knits than I do with woven fabrics. And my machine that I'm using, the 400, did not like this. I had the walking foot on, I had Mariflex thread, and I was trying to baste in my bands, and I went ahead and used it to hem the t-shirt, and it was stalling out on me. It was not feeding through very nicely. I was struggling a little bit to make a simple t-shirt. This is something on Ashton, who was my designer diamond royale, that took minutes to make. I could whip out a t-shirt in less than an hour, and I'm ashamed to say how long it took me to get this finished. There was some unpicking involved, and I'm not 100% pleased with it. So it's a little bit of a shame because this is kind of precious fabric since my little guy wanted it so much, but he's 5, and to be realistic, he's not going to notice those details that we would notice. He's just going to be excited to have this cat shirt. They have a pet cat, and hence all the cat fabric that I have. Sewing and struggling with this showed me how much the machine makes a difference. I was away from my sewing room for 2 weeks, and I've got a lot of pent-up sewing desire in me. I don't have a desire to struggle, so I'm gonna reshuffle my plans a little bit to sew things that I know I can sew successfully on the equipment that I have. And I'm going back into my work in progress piles, and I'm going to pick up a refashion. This is the True Bias Mauve skirt. I sewed it, I think, 2 years ago out of this Lady McElroy cotton lawn. I love this, but it is a little bit too short. I'm going to add a ruffle and see how I feel about that. That'll make it wearable. I'm not too sure about the ruffle, but I'm going to put one on just so that this is wearable. I liked the idea of it being one piece. And I think if I sew this again, depending on how I feel about it with the ruffle, I might just make this a little longer and make the adjustment. The main problem is that with my bootie, it lifts up the back of the skirt a little bit. And so the side view is the back is higher than the front. And I do know how to fix that. So I'm going to see how I like it with a ruffle. I'm going to make this wearable. It is cute. It is some really great fabric. And I have some left over. Cotton lawn works fine with my 400 machine. And I can do my gathering on the serger, so that won't be the chore that would maybe put me off of a ruffle. I'm glad I took the time to really figure out what it was I wanted in a machine that would meet my needs, and I look forward to sewing lots of beautiful things in the future. I'd love to know what you're sewing. In the meantime, I'll be here sewing on my older machines, having a good time.